They think I rejected the Alpha King because I was scared of him. They don't understand. I rejected him because the moment I accept him, he dies. Not one day. Not years from now. I mean soon, the kind of death that happens fast, like fate was waiting with its hand already on his throat. In our world, the mate bond is law. It's celebrated like a blessing. Like destiny finally chooses someone and makes them whole. But my bloodline doesn't carry blessings. It carries a curse, quiet, ancient, and patient. A curse that sleeps in the daughters of my family until the wrong man claims us. And then it wakes up hungry. So when the summons came, Moon Court. Immediately. I already knew what they wanted. They wanted me under torchlight. They wanted witnesses. They wanted control disguised as tradition. The hall was a cathedral of power. Stone pillars, watching eyes, silent alphas sitting like gods carved into chairs. Warriors lined the walls like a living cage. And at the center of it all stood Kale Draven. Alpha King. The man whose name makes packs go quiet. He didn't look angry. He didn't look cruel. He looked inevitable. Like the world had already decided he would win every battle before it started. Then his eyes found mine. And my wolf, my stubborn, furious wolf, did the one thing it had never done in my life. It bowed. A servant stepped forward and placed thin papers in my hands like they were harmless. Rejection papers. My fingers trembled around the pen, not because I didn't want him, but because I did. Because some broken part of me wanted to believe I could keep him and keep him alive. I forced my hand steady. I signed. A tear hit the ink, blurring my name like my soul was trying to take it back. I slid the papers forward. Kale walked closer. He picked them up. He stared at my signature for one long breath, then tore them in half. Once. Twice. Gasps slammed through the room. The elder's smile cracked. Kale lifted his eyes to mine and said, calm as death, "You don't get to reject me." And when his thumb brushed my wrist, something black-hot moved under my skin, like a mark waking up. Behind us, the elder shouted, "Seize her!" Steel scraped stone. Warriors searched. Kale's voice dropped so low only I could hear. "Whatever you're hiding, they already know." Then he straightened, power rolling through the hall like thunder. "Touch her," the Alpha King said, "and you answer to me." That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't a rejection. This was the beginning of a war. The silence in the Moon Court was heavy enough to crush bones. Hundreds of eyes, alphas, elders, and high-born nobles clad in silk and velvet, bore into me. They were waiting for me to break. But the only eyes that mattered were gold, burning with a possessiveness that terrified me. Alpha King Kale stepped down from the obsidian dais. The air crackled with his pheromones, cedar, rain, and raw, suffocating power. He didn't ask. He didn't propose. He simply declared it to the room, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Isla, you are mine." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. The king had never claimed anyone. He was supposed to marry a high-born she-wolf, a diplomat's daughter, not a quiet omega from the borderlands. My heart shattered, but I kept my face like stone. I loved him. Gods, I loved him. Which was exactly why I had to do this. I could feel the ancient curse in my blood singing, waiting for a connection to destroy him. If I accepted him, I would be his death sentence. "Bring the papers," I whispered. My hands trembled violently as I picked up the quill. The rejection document lay on the heavy iron table between us. The ink looked like spilled oil. Kale watched me, his expression unreadable, his body coiled tight as a spring. He wasn't stopping me. He was watching me. I love the Crescent Pack. My voice shook, hot tears spilling over and hitting the parchment. Reject Kale, the Alpha King, as my mate. The scratch of the quill was a scream in the silence. I signed my name. It was done. I waited for his anger. I waited for the bond to snap, for him to fall to his knees in the agony of rejection. Instead, Kale stepped forward. The crowd flinched, but he didn't look at them. He looked only at me. "You thinking change is what we are?" he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. The sound sent a shiver down my spine. He reached out, his large hand covering the paper I had just signed. "You think I will let you go that easily?" He picked up the document. Then, staring dead into my wet eyes, he tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed like a gunshot. As the fibers tore, a hiss filled the room. The paper didn't just rip. It ignited. Blue flames consumed the parchment in Cale's hand, turning it to ash instantly, yet his skin remained unburned. At the same moment, a searing pain shot up my arm. I screamed as a black vein-like mark bloomed on my wrist, pulsating like a second heart. Cale dragged me into the private antechamber before the smoke from the burning paper had even cleared. His grip on my upper arm was iron-tight, not painful but unyielding. He slammed the heavy oak doors shut, the sound echoing like a thunderclap that finally locked out the whispering court. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He turned to me with a terrifying predator-like stillness. "Explain," he demanded. His voice was controlled, devoid of emotion, but his chest heaved with the effort to restrain his wolf. "That mark. What did you do?" "I tried to save you," I cried, backing away until my shoulders hit the cold stone wall. I cradled my wrist. The black mark was pulsating, hot and angry against my skin. "You don't understand, Cale. If I accept the bond, you die. It's a curse in my bloodline." He laughed, a dark, humorless sound that scraped against my nerves. He stepped into my space, boxing me in with his arms, his body a wall of heat and muscle. "I am the Alpha King," he murmured, leaning down until his lips brushed my ear. "No curse kills me. You are making excuses because you are afraid." "I am terrified," I insisted, tears blurring my vision. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid for you. Then stop fighting it." He leaned his forehead against mine, his gold eyes boring into my soul. "You're mine, Isla. And that is the problem. You think you have a choice." "Cale, please." Before I could finish, the black mark on my wrist flared white-hot. It wasn't just heat. It was a violent surge of energy. Cale flinched, his eyes rolling back as the power jumped from me to him. It wasn't the pleasure of a mating bond, it was agony. He stumbled back, clutching his chest as if he'd been struck by a hammer. He gasped, his skin turning ashen for a split second. "See," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It hurts you. It rejects you." He looked at me, confusion warring with the pain in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but the heavy doors burst open. Elder Marcus stood there, flanked by 4 royal guards. The old wolf's face was twisted in false sorrow, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He looked from Cale's breathless form to the black, throbbing veins on my wrist. "The court saw the mark, my king," Marcus said, his voice carrying a deadly finality. "She carries the rot." "Get out," Cale snarled, straightening up despite the pain, placing himself between me and the guards. Marcus didn't retreat. He pointed a shaking finger at me, raising his voice so the nobles in the hallway could hear. "She is a danger to the crown. By ancient law, a rejected mate who endangers the king's life cannot be allowed to roam free." The guards stepped forward, hands on their weapons. "She must be executed immediately," Marcus declared, "to protect the pack." Guards grabbed my arms before I could even scream. Their fingers dug into my bruised skin, dragging me out of the antechamber and into the cold night air. The courtyard was already packed. They were taking me to the execution stone, a slab of granite stained with centuries of traitor blood. "Cale!" I screamed, my feet skidding on the gravel. Cale was still in the doorway, recovering from the bond surge, but at the sound of my distress, his gold eyes snapped open. He didn't run. He unleashed. "Stop!" The command didn't just echo. It hit the courtyard like a physical shockwave. The air pressure dropped instantly. Every wolf, from the guards holding me to the nobles on the balcony, froze in place. Their knees buckled under the sheer weight of the Alpha King's will. Silence fell, absolute and terrifying. Cale straightened, pushing past the frozen guards. He looked lethal. "Touch her," he snarled, walking toward us with a slow, predatory gait. "And I will paint this courtyard with your entrails." I looked around the circle of paralyzed wolves. I expected to see them looking at Cale in terror. He was a monster in his rage. But they weren't looking at him. They were staring at me. They were staring at the black, pulsing veins on my wrist with pure, unadulterated horror. "She is the void!" a woman whispered from the front row, trembling. She will consume us all. The command was fading. Movement rippled back through the crowd. A sharp whistle cut through the heavy air. From the shadows of the high tower, a glimmer of light flashed. A silver-tipped arrow. It was moving too fast. It was aimed straight for my heart. I couldn't move. Fear had rooted me to the spot. But Kale moved faster than thought. He threw his body in front of mine. There was a sickening thud as the silver point punched through armor and flesh. He grunted, the sound wet and heavy, and slammed into me. Kale! I gasped. He didn't fall. He stood there, a living shield. But the arrow had gone deep into his shoulder. Warm metallic liquid sprayed over my face and soaked into the neck of my dress. The moment the Alpha King's blood touched my skin, the world didn't just stop, it shattered. My vision turned red. A heat hotter than fire exploded in my marrow. My bones cracked audibly, reshaping violently. The black mark on my wrist erupted with blinding violet light. I fell to the ground, arching my back as a scream tore from my throat. It wasn't a scream of pain but of power. A partial shift, something impossible for a weak Omega, ripped through me, unleashing something that had been sleeping for 1,000 years. My vision sharpened into razor-edge focus. The world didn't look the same. It looked like a map of veins and vulnerabilities. I could smell the oxide in the silver arrow still lodged in Kale's shoulder. I could hear the erratic, terrified heartbeats of the guards 20 feet away. I could taste the fear in the air like copper on my tongue. I looked down at my hands. They weren't soft Omega hands anymore. They were elongated, the skin shimmering with a faint iridescent sheen, the fingers tipped with obsidian claws that glistened in the moonlight. Kale ripped the arrow from his shoulder with a savage grunt, tossing the bloody silver aside as if it were a twig. He ignored the wound pouring blood down his chest. He stared at me, his gold eyes wide, not with horror, but with a sudden jarring realization. "You're not an Omega," he breathed, stepping closer despite the lethal claws I now sported. "You've never been weak, Isla. You've been suppressed." "It's older than wolves," I gasped. The voice that came out of my throat wasn't just mine. It vibrated with a low harmonic distortion, like two voices speaking at once. "My blood. It's not just cursed, Kale. It's different." The guards were recovering from the shock, stepping forward with spears raised, their fear turning into aggression. "She's shifting," one shouted. "Kill the monster before she fully turns." Kale didn't let them get close. He scooped me up in his arms, shielding me with his own body. He snarled at the crowd, a sound so guttural it shook the stones beneath our feet. "Make a move, and I burn this city to the ground." No one dared to follow as he turned and ran. He carried me deep into the palace, past the grand halls, down a hidden spiral staircase cut into the living rock foundation. We descended into the king's sanctuary, a place of absolute silence, where no one else was allowed to enter. He kicked the heavy stone door shut and set me down gently on the cool floor. The room was lit only by glowing moss and ancient torches that flickered to life as we entered. "We figure this out," he said, pressing a cloth to his bleeding shoulder, his face pale but determined. "Here. Together." My adrenaline was crashing, but the strange power under my skin was still humming. I backed away, needing space to breathe. My claws scraped against the stone walls, leaving deep gouges in the granite. I looked up at the walls. They were covered in history, carvings of past kings, great battles, and the origin of the Pax. I walked along the perimeter, tracing the stone until my hand froze. My heart stopped. There, etched into stone that was thousands of years old, was a face. My face. The curve of the jaw, the wide eyes, the specific shape of the brow, it was undeniable. But in the carving I wasn't smiling. I was standing over the body of an Alpha King, his chest torn open, his crown broken in the dirt. I read the ancient runes beneath the carving, my blood turning to ice. The Wolf Queen who ends kings. For 3 days the sanctuary felt less like a haven and more like a tomb. The stone carving of my face, the Wolf Queen who ends kings, loomed over us, a silent promise of doom in the flickering torchlight. Kale was exhausted. His golden eyes were rimmed with red, his uniform rumpled. He held me close, whispering promises that felt increasingly fragile. I won't let them touch you, Isla. I'm handling the council. But I wasn't deaf. Through the stone ceiling, I could hear the shouting from the great hall. The council wasn't just angry, they were demanding blood. They called for a purity trial, a polite, archaic term for torture designed to prove whether a wolf was corrupted by dark magic. If I failed, I burned. If I passed, I was maimed. On the fourth morning, Kale left early to meet his generals. I was alone with the carving. A faint scratching sound drew me to the heavy oak door. A folded piece of parchment was sliding underneath. I snatched it up, my heart hammering. The seal was familiar. A dried lavender sprig pressed into wax. It was from Milla, the woman who had raised me after my parents died. She was the only mother I knew, the only person I trusted implicitly. My hand shook as I unfolded it. Isla, run. He knows what you are. The council is demanding the purity trial, and Kale has agreed to it. It is a trap. He isn't trying to save you. He needs to stress your system to unlock the ancient power in your blood. You are a battery to him, not a mate. Get out before the moon rises, or you will never leave. The air left my lungs. He agreed to the trial. Doubt is a fast-acting poison, and it flooded my veins instantly. I had to know. I crept to the door, cracking it open just a sliver to peer into the dim corridor. Kale was there. But he wasn't with his generals. He was huddled in the shadows with a hooded figure, the High Witch of the West. The air around them smelled of sulfur and burnt sage. I watched paralyzed as Kale handed the witch a small glass vial. Inside, red liquid swirled. My blood. From the bandages he had changed for me yesterday. Is it enough? Kale asked, his voice low and urgent. To bind the power to the host? Yes. The witch hissed, tucking the vial into her robes. But it will hurt her. Do it, Kale said. I shut the door silently, my back sliding down the wood. Milla was right. He wasn't protecting me. He was harvesting me. I had been right to reject him in the moon court. The instinct that screamed at me hadn't been fear. It had been survival. I didn't pack. I didn't leave a note. I used the servant's hatch in the back of the pantry, a narrow tunnel that dumped me out near the forest edge. I sprinted. The cold air bit at my face, branches whipping my skin, but I didn't feel the chill. I only felt the betrayal burning a hole in my chest. I ran until my lungs burned, putting a mile between me and the palace. I was crossing the pack border when the invisible tether between us snapped tight. It wasn't a tug. It was a violent yank that nearly floored me. But I felt his pain more than mine. Across the distance through the bond one tried so hard to deny. I felt the Alpha King crash to his knees on the stone floor. The connection forced a channel open, carrying his desperate, strained voice directly into my skull. Isla, stop. You don't know what you're doing. If you leave the protection of the territory, they will wake it. I didn't stop running. I ignored the voice of the king echoing in my skull, pushing my body past the point of exhaustion. My lungs burned like they were filled with broken glass, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the memory forcing its way to the surface. Suddenly, I wasn't running through a dark forest. I was 6 years old, hiding under a table while rain hammered against our tin roof. Flashback. My mother gripped my small shoulders, her nails digging in. She smelled of fear and sage. Listen to me, Isla, she hissed, her eyes wide and terrified. Hide your scent. Mask it with mud, with ash, with anything. Never let an alpha claim you. Why, Mama? I had whimpered. Because you are not just a wolf, she whispered, a tear tracking through the dirt on her cheek. You are the vessel. You carry the moon devourer. Sleeps until a king claims you. If that happens, the king dies and the world burns. I blinked and the memory shattered. I was back in the cold night, blinded by tears and panic. I slammed into a wall of solid muscle. I bounced back, hitting the damp earth hard. I scrambled backward, claws extending, ready to fight, but a boot stomped down on my chest, pinning me to the ground. I looked up. It wasn't Kale. It was Vargas, the alpha of the rival Blood Iron pack. He loomed over me, a jagged scar running down his left eye, smiling to reveal yellowed teeth. The runaway bride, he sneered, looking down at me like a prize pig. We've been waiting for you to leave his protection. Let me go. I snarled, slashing at his leg. He didn't flinch. Two of his warriors stepped out of the shadows, throwing a net of silver chains over me. The metal hissed against my skin, sapping my strength instantly. They dragged me through the brush to a clearing where a temporary camp was set up. They didn't torture me. They didn't beat me. Vargas simply sat me down on a log and threw a heavy rolled parchment at my feet. You think your curse is just bad luck, little girl? Vargas laughed, pacing in front of me. You think the moon goddess just decided to hate you? I am cursed. I spat, struggling against the silver chains. I am a danger to everyone. You are a weapon, Vargas corrected. And weapons are forged, not born. He kicked the scroll open. Read it. I looked down. It wasn't an ancient prophecy. It was a contract. A magical binding spell drafted 20 years ago, designed to graft a parasitic entity, the Moon Devourer, into the bloodline of a specific Omega family. My family. They needed a failsafe, Vargas explained, his voice dripping with malice. A way to kill an Alpha King if he ever became too powerful to control. They turned you into a ticking time bomb. My eyes scanned the bottom of the contract. I felt the bile rise in my throat. The signature wasn't a stranger's. It was jagged, arrogant, and familiar. Marcus Valerius. The world tilted on its axis. Elder Marcus, the head of Kale's Moon Court. The man who had called for my execution in the throne room. The man who demanded the purity trial to save the pack. He was the one who had cursed my bloodline to begin with. He created the poison, and now he was trying to kill me to hide the evidence. Vargas kept me in a cage woven from silver wire, waiting. He'll come, he said, sharpening his blade. And when he does, we end the royal line tonight. I gripped the cold bars, my skin blistering where it touched the metal. Run, Kale, I whispered to the dark forest. Please don't come. But at midnight the forest exploded. It wasn't a chaotic invasion. There were no war drums, no howling army. Kale didn't come with a legion. He came alone. He emerged from the treeline like a wraith. The Bloodiron guards charged him, a wall of snarling fur and muscle, but Kale didn't break stride. He moved with a terrifying cold precision that I had never seen before. He ducked under a swinging claymore, his movement fluid as water, and silenced the attacker with a single, calculated strike to the throat. He wasn't fighting like a wolf in a blood rage. He was fighting like a king. I watched, mesmerized and horrified. He dismantled Vargas's elite guard surgically. He didn't waste energy on cruelty. He simply ended them. A snap of a neck here, a shattered knee there. He was an unstoppable force of discipline. This was why the packs feared him. Not because he was the strongest, but because he was the most efficient killer in the kingdom. Vargas roared orders, but his men were falling like wheat before a scythe. Kale reached my cage, his chest heaving, his uniform dark with blood, none of it his own. Yet, he gripped the silver door. The metal hissed against his skin, burning him, but he didn't flinch. With a grunt of exertion, he ripped the door off its hinges and tossed it aside. Isla, he breathed, reaching for me. I scrambled out, falling into his arms. But as I touched him, I felt it. He was trembling. Kale. I pulled back slightly to look at him. Up close, the terrified awe vanished, replaced by cold dread. His skin was translucent, pale as moonlight. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his golden eyes were dimming, flickering like a dying candle. The bond wasn't just connecting us. It was siphoning him. Every second he spent near me, protecting me, his life force was pouring into the bottomless pit of the curse. He stumbled, his heavy weight leaning against me. The invincible king was barely standing. Vargas stood on the ridge above us, safely out of reach, watching the scene with a twisted grin. He didn't look defeated. He looked satisfied. Look at him, girl. Vargas laughed, the sound echoing through the slaughter. Do you see it now? The contract is working perfectly. Kale growled, trying to step toward the ridge, but his legs buckled. I caught him struggling under his weight. Every time he saves you, the curse feeds. Vargas shouted, his voice dripping with triumph. It eats his strength to fuel your survival. Keep running, Isla. By sunrise, he won't be a king anymore. He'll just be a dry husk. He will be your sacrifice. We crashed through the massive double doors of the Moon Court, a broken king and his walking death sentence. Kale collapsed the moment we crossed the threshold, his legs finally giving out under the weight of the curse draining him. He falls. Elder Marcus shouted, his voice ringing with theatrical panic. The council surrounded us instantly, a circle of velvet robes and bared teeth. The king is dying. The curse is active. The girl must be severed from him immediately to save the crown. Guards stepped forward with drawn swords, but I threw myself over Kale's body, growling. My claws were out, my eyes flashing violet. Touch him and you die. Kale struggled to his feet, using me as a crutch. He was gray, his breath rattling in his chest, but when he looked at the council, the alpha command still flickered in his eyes. No one dies today, Kale rasped. He looked at the court, then down at me, his gaze full of a heartbreaking apology. Except the king. He turned to the high priestess. I invoked the right of abdication. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Even the guards lowered their weapons in shock. You cannot, Marcus sputtered, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of something else, anticipation. You are the blood heir. I break the royal line, Kale said, his voice weak but steady, booming with the finality of a closing coffin. I surrender the crown. I renounce my title. If I am not Alpha King, the curse has no fuel. It cannot kill a man who rules nothing. No, I screamed, grabbing his tunic. I won't let you. You worked your whole life for this pack. I won't let you lose everything because of me. It's the only way, Isla, Kale whispered, his hand trembling as he cupped my face. I choose you. I choose us. But I looked past him. I looked at Marcus. The elder wasn't horrified. He wasn't scrambling to stop the king from destroying the monarchy. He was smiling. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind, violent and clear. The contract. The curse. The demand for the trial. It wasn't about saving the pack from a monster. It was a coup. Marcus wanted Kale dethroned, but he couldn't kill him in combat. He needed Kale to give it up willingly. It's a trap, I breathed, horror cold in my veins. Kale don't. He wants you to abdicate. I'm just the weapon he's using to break you. It's too late, Marcus sneered, stepping forward. The sun has set. Above us, the heavy clouds parted. The full moon, bloated and white, crested through the crystal skylight. Its light hit me like a physical blow. My back arched violently, a sound tearing from my throat that wasn't human. The black mark on my wrist didn't just pulse. It expanded, shooting up my arm, turning my veins into rivers of ink that raced toward my heart. Isla! Kale shouted, reaching for me, but the energy blasted him backward. I collapsed to the marble floor, my vision going black as the ancient magic finally woke up. But it wasn't pain this time. It was a terrifying cold clarity. A presence filled my mind, pushing my own consciousness into the corner. I opened my eyes. They weren't mine anymore. A voice, ancient and cold as the void between stars, spoke from inside my own chest, using my vocal cords to address the room. Finally, the voice inside me wasn't evil. It was furious. It felt less like a possession and more like a sword being drawn from a stone. I stood up, the motion unnatural and fluid, like water flowing uphill. My eyes, I knew, were no longer brown. They were burning violet. Kill it! Elder Marcus screamed, stumbling back, his composure shattering. Kill the beast before it devours the king. Do it, Kale. Fulfill your duty. Kale stood his ground. He looked wrecked, his skin gray and sweat-slicked, but his golden eyes were clear. He stepped between me and the guards, shielding the monster I had become. No, Kale rasped. I do not kill my mate. And I do not obey traitors. I laughed. The sound was harmonic, vibrating against the stained glass windows. You wanted a monster, Marcus? I said, the ancient voice overlaying my own. I'll give you a monster. I didn't attack Kale. I turned the curse outward. I raised my hand, pointing a clawed finger straight at the elder. The black veins on my arm didn't reach for the king this time. They shot across the room like spears of shadow, bypassing the guards and striking Marcus squarely in the chest. You signed the contract, I thundered, the entity remembering the taste of the ink from 20 years ago. You planted the seed. Now you eat the fruit. Marcus shrieked, a high, thin sound, as the curse reversed its flow. Instead of draining Cale to feed me, it drained Marcus to feed the void. The court watched in stunned silence as the High Elder withered. His skin grayed, his eyes sunk, and within seconds, he collapsed into a pile of dry robes and dust. The entity sighed, satisfied, and receded into the back of my mind. The violet light in my vision faded, leaving me gasping, my knees hitting the floor. But Cale caught me. The silence in the moon court was absolute. The remaining elders looked from the pile of dust to the king who had refused to abdicate. The law says a rejected mate must be executed, Cale said softly, looking at the stunned council. Then change the law, I whispered, gripping his tunic. He smiled, a true weary smile. He took my hand, the one still etched with faint black lines, and pressed it over his heart. We performed the bonding ritual right there, amidst the ruins of the coup. No priests, no papers, just his blood and mine rewriting the history of the pack. Hours later, the palace was quiet. We were in the king's chambers, the adrenaline finally fading into exhaustion. On the nightstand lay the rejection papers from that first morning. I had taped them back together. They weren't a symbol of shame anymore. They were a reminder that we had torn fate apart and stitched it back together on our own terms. Cale was sleeping, his breathing deep, and even for the first time in days, I lay beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. The curse was dormant, tamed by the death of its creator. I reached out, wanting to feel the steady beat of his heart. I traced the mating mark on his pectorals, the wolf silhouette that matched the one on my neck. But as my fingertips brushed his skin, I felt a strange vibration. A hum, low and guttural, that hadn't been there before. I frowned and pulled the sheet back further. My breath hitched. Right next to the wolf mark, the skin was rippling. A second symbol was forming, embossed in gold and onyx. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't the curse. The texture was rough, armor-plated. Gales. I pulled my hand back, my heart hammering a new rhythm. The bond hadn't just woken up the monster in me. It had woken up something in him too. Something older than wolves. Something that had wings. And it was hungry.